What if I told you that in 1947, a cargo ship returned to port completely on its own, with every control panel still operating as if invisible hands were guiding it home? What if I told you that when authorities boarded this vessel, they found 23 crew members in perfect condition, sitting at their posts, eyes wide open, but completely and utterly dead? And what if I told you that the only explanation the investigators could find was written in the captain's final log entry? The shadows are learning to work the machines. This is the story of the MV Kerberos, and what happened to her crew remains one of the most disturbing maritime mysteries ever recorded. But before we dive into this nightmare, I need you to understand something crucial about what you're about to hear. This case was buried by 3 different governments, sealed away in classified files for over 70 years. And the only reason we know about it today is because one man broke his oath of silence on his deathbed. The Kerberos was a Dutch cargo vessel built in 1938, designed to transport heavy machinery between European ports. She was nothing special to look at, just another grey steel workhorse cutting through the Atlantic waves. But the Kerberos had one unusual feature that would prove crucial to understanding what happened aboard her. The ship's cargo hold had been retrofitted with experimental refrigeration units, designed to preserve sensitive mechanical components during long voyages. On October 15, 1947, the Kerberos departed from Amsterdam with a crew of 23 men and a cargo manifest that listed industrial equipment bound for a reconstruction project in war-torn Germany. The captain, Henrik Voss, was a veteran sailor who had survived 4 years of wartime voyages. His crew consisted of experienced seamen, engineers, and mechanics, all hand-picked for their reliability and discretion. The voyage should have taken 5 days. Instead, the Kerberos vanished without a trace. For 11 days, maritime authorities found nothing. No distress signals, no debris, no oil slicks. The ship had simply disappeared somewhere in the North Sea, as if it had sailed into another dimension entirely. Lloyd's of London began preparing insurance payouts. Families started planning funerals. The Kerberos was officially declared lost at sea. But on October 30th, Halloween night, something impossible happened. The harbour master at Rotterdam was finishing his evening rounds when he spotted lights on the horizon. As he watched through his binoculars, a familiar silhouette emerged from the fog. It was the Kerberos, sailing under her own power. Navigation lights blinking normally, moving with the steady precision of a ship under experienced command. The harbour master immediately radioed the vessel, but received no response. He tried again and again, cycling through every frequency, but the Kerberos remained silent as she glided into port. Her engines shut down at exactly the right moment. Her anchor dropped with mechanical precision. Every maneuver was executed flawlessly, as if guided by the most skilled crew imaginable. But when the harbour police boarded the vessel, they discovered something that would haunt every witness for the rest of their lives. The crew of the Kerberos was at their posts. Every single man was exactly where he should have been. The captain stood at the bridge, his hands resting on the ship's wheel. The engineer sat at his control panel in the engine room. The radio operator hunched over his equipment, headphones still on his ears. They looked like they were simply concentrating on their duties. Except they were all dead. Not recently dead, mind you. The ship's doctor, who was among the first officials to examine the bodies, estimated they had been deceased for at least a week. But here's what made no sense. There were no signs of violence, no indications of disease, no evidence of poisoning or suffocation. Every man appeared to have simply stopped living while continuing to work. Their eyes were open, staring ahead with an expression of intense focus. Their muscles showed no signs of rigor mortis, as if death had frozen them in a state of perpetual alertness. Most disturbing of all, their hands were positioned on controls and instruments with a precision that suggested they had been operating the ship's systems. Right up until the moment of their death, the official investigation began immediately, led by Dutch authorities working alongside British maritime experts. What they found in the ship's logs defied every rational explanation. According to the navigation records, The Kerberos had maintained perfect course headings for 11 straight days. Engine logs showed consistent power output and fuel consumption. Even the ship's chronometer had been wound daily, right up until the moment she docked in Rotterdam. But the most chilling discovery was found in Captain Voss's personal journal. The first few entries were routine, documenting weather conditions and cargo status. But starting on October 18th, just 3 days into the voyage, the entries began to change. Voss wrote about strange sounds coming from the cargo hold during the night watch. Metallic clanging, as if heavy machinery was being moved around. But when crew members investigated, they found everything exactly where it should be, secured and undisturbed. On October 19th, Voss noted that several crew members had reported seeing figures moving in their peripheral vision, shadowy shapes that disappeared when they turned to look directly. The captain dismissed these as symptoms of fatigue and ordered extended rest periods for all hands. But the incidents escalated. On October 20th, the ship's engineer reported that the refrigeration units in the cargo hold were operating independently, turning on and off according to some pattern he couldn't understand. When he tried to manually override the system, the controls wouldn't respond to his commands. It was as if something else was operating the machinery. October 21st brought the first mention of what Voss called the learning crew members began reporting that they felt compelled to remain at their stations, even during off-duty hours. They described an overwhelming urge to keep working, to keep the ship running smoothly. Several men mentioned feeling as though someone was standing directly behind them, watching their every movement and memorizing their actions. The final entry in Voss's journal is dated October 22nd, and it contains just 13 words that have puzzled investigators for over 7 decades. They're learning to work the machines. God help us, they're learning fast. After that, the official ship's log continued to be maintained, but the handwriting was different. Navigation entries were recorded in a script that matched no crew member's writing style. Equipment checks were logged with mechanical precision, noting measurements and readings down to decimal places that no human would bother recording. Most unsettling of all, the log entries continued for 3 more days after the crew had died. The cargo hold examination revealed the source of the refrigeration anomalies. The experimental cooling units had been operating at maximum capacity for the entire 11-day period, maintaining a temperature of exactly -18 degrees Celsius. But when investigators opened the cargo containers, they found something that wasn't on the original manifest. 23 additional refrigeration units, identical to the ship's own equipment, were packed in the containers. According to the shipping documents, these units were supposed to be delivered to a German industrial facility. But the delivery address led to a bombed-out factory that had been abandoned since the war ended. Further investigation revealed that the refrigeration manufacturer had no record of producing these additional units. The serial numbers didn't match any of their production logs. When technicians examined the equipment, they discovered that the internal components were arranged in configurations that shouldn't have been possible with 1940s technology. But the most disturbing discovery came when investigators tried to shut down the ship's refrigeration systems. The moment they cut power to the units, every instrument on the bridge began operating simultaneously. Engines started without anyone turning the ignition. Navigation equipment began plotting courses to coordinates that didn't exist on any chart. The ship's whistle began sounding in patterns that resembled Morse code but spelled out no recognizable message. The activity continued for exactly 18 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it had begun. When power was restored to the refrigeration units, all systems returned to normal. The official report, classified immediately upon completion, concluded that the crew of the Kerberos had succumbed to an unknown form of mass psychosis, possibly triggered by carbon monoxide poisoning from the experimental refrigeration equipment. The ship's autonomous return to port was attributed to locked steering mechanisms and favorable currents. But the lead investigator, a man named Dr. Willem Hendricks, never believed the official explanation. Years later, in a sealed letter opened only after his death in 1998, Hendricks wrote about what he really thought had happened. Aboard the Kerberos, according to Hendricks, the refrigeration units in the cargo hold weren't designed for preserving machinery. They were designed for preserving something else entirely, something that had been dormant since the war ended, waiting in the cold darkness for the right conditions to awaken. Hendricks believed that the crew of the Kerberos had encountered something that existed in the spaces between life and death, something that could observe and learn and eventually mimic human behavior with perfect accuracy. The shadows that crew members reported seeing weren't hallucinations, Hendricks claimed. They were entities studying human movement, learning how to operate in the physical world. The refrigeration units, he theorized, served as some kind of anchor point, allowing these entities to maintain their presence in our reality for extended periods. As long as the temperature remained constant, they could continue their observations and gradually take over the ship's operations. But Hendricks's most terrifying conclusion was that the entities hadn't simply killed the crew and taken over the ship. Instead, they had somehow merged with the crew members, using their bodies as puppets while learning to operate independently. The men were dead, but something was still using their knowledge, their memories, their muscle memory to keep the ship running. And that something had successfully delivered itself to a European port, where it could begin spreading to other vessels, other crews, other victims. The Kerberos was quietly scrapped 6 months after her mysterious return. Her refrigeration equipment was destroyed, her cargo was incinerated, and every official record of the incident was sealed away in government archives. The families of the crew were told their loved ones had died in a tragic accident at sea, and were paid substantial compensation in exchange for their silence. But if Dr. Hendricks was right, then the entities that claimed the Kerberos and her crew are still out there, still learning, still adapting to our world. And every time a ship disappears without explanation, every time a vessel returns to port with a dead or missing crew, we have to wonder, are the shadows still learning to work the machines? There are reports, unconfirmed but persistent, of similar incidents occurring in the decades since the Kerberos affair. Ships found drifting with crews that appear to be alive but don't respond to radio calls. Cargo vessels that dock themselves with impossible precision despite having no one at the helm. Refrigerated containers that arrive at destinations they were never shipped to, containing equipment that no manufacturer claims to have produced. And sometimes, late at night in ports around the world, dock workers report seeing figures moving in the shadows between ships, watching the loading procedures, studying the way humans interact with their machines, learning how to blend in among us. The shipping industry has developed informal protocols for dealing with these incidents. Vessels that return under suspicious circumstances are quietly quarantined. Crews that survive encounters with unexplained phenomena are debriefed and relocated to land-based positions. Refrigerated cargo is subject to additional inspections that officially don't exist, because somewhere in the cold darkness of the world's shipping routes, something that learned to operate the Kerberos is still out there, still perfecting its ability to mimic human behavior, still spreading from ship to ship like a contagion of shadows. The next time you see a cargo ship gliding silently into port with all its lights functioning perfectly, ask yourself this question: who's really steering that vessel? And if you ever find yourself working near industrial refrigeration equipment, pay attention to the shadows around you. If they seem to be watching, if they appear to be learning from your movements, remember the crew of the Kerberos, because the shadows that claimed them are still out there, still learning to work our machines, still waiting for the right moment to reveal just how much they've learned about being human. And when that moment comes, we might discover that we've been sharing our world with something far more terrifying than ghosts or demons, or any supernatural entity our nightmares have ever conjured. We might discover that we've been teaching our replacements how to take over everything we've built, one shadow at a time. The Kerberos returned to port with no living crew, but she didn't return empty. She brought back something that had learned to wear human faces, to operate human machines, to exist in human spaces without being detected. And that something is still out there, still learning, still growing stronger, still waiting for the perfect moment to show us exactly what it has learned. What happened to the crew of the Kerberos remains officially unexplained to this day. The ship's final fate, the truth behind those mysterious refrigeration units, and the nature of the entities that Dr. Hendricks believed had claimed the vessel may never be fully understood. But one thing is certain: in the dark waters of the world's shipping lanes, some mysteries are better left unsolved, because sometimes the answers we seek are more terrifying than the questions we dare to ask.